very busy. Uh, and they weren't all musicals, because I went back and checked what list I could find. It wasn't easy, and believe me, you cannot rent any of these movies. They are not on video, and I'm certain they will not be on DVD. Luckily, they make these books, where I could look up to see when movies were made. And some of them include Artists and Models, This Way Please, College Holiday, Mountain Music, where she had her first speaking role with Martha Raye and Bob Burns. Nightclub Scandals. I said, how can you make a musical from Nightclub Scandals? So I looked it up in the book. It wasn't a musical. It was a detective story, a murder mystery with John Barrymore. That meant she was acting. Waikiki Wedding with Bing Crosby. The big broadcast of 1938, Bob Hope, which I do have some photos here that of her and the other women in the chorus posing with Bob. Every Day's a Holiday that she did with Mae West. Wells Fargo, also not a musical. It's a Western. More acting. College Swing, and Too Many Girls, which was with Lucille Ball. From there, she went back to Broadway for a little bit, then started, as they did in the late 30s, joined musical groups and did musical reviews, and they traveled. While she was in Philadelphia, excuse me, a gentleman who produced shows in London found her along with 7 other girls, took them to London, and they opened and she did about a 9-month stint at the Dorchester Hotel, which was the hotel in London. That's where royalty came, so she had a good time. I have a display over here of some of the local London papers. She had to leave in 1939 and come back, mostly due to the fact that there was war impending over there. And she did talk about them digging trenches to put artillery and stuff across from the hotel that she stayed in London. She was fitted for gas mask, and she carried little cards so that if she did go back, she could get a gas mask. What else did she have to say about that? She enjoyed Europe. I think if she had lived long enough, she wanted to go back when it was safer, because she wanted to pursue her entertainment career in Europe. She gets back in 39, comes home, rests in Two Rivers, visits mom and dad, parties a little, and then goes off to New York again for about a year, comes to Chicago, is in a couple of plays at the Schubert Theater, which if you've been to Chicago, you know is a big theater down there. From there, she decided that she wanted to go into radio. That she wasn't, it wasn't something that she hadn't done, and she wanted to try it, because while she was in London, she had the opportunity to do some choreography, costume design, and such, and she wanted to do a little bit more of that. So she managed to become one of the half a dozen to 10 people, 6 to 10 people that were part of the Danny Thomas show in Chicago. She did that for about 9 months when she became very ill in late 1943. That cut her career totally. She wound up doing surgery, coming back and staying with my grandpa and grandma. They took care of her for the next 5 years, running her to and from the Mayo Clinic when she passed away in early 1949. Now, my dad's view of his Aunt Beatrice is a little different than one you would find in the newspapers. When he was turning 1 year old, my grandparents, by the way, lived over on 29th Street in Adams. He's 1 year old. Big limo pulls up outside. Out steps Beatrice and her current boyfriend, Curly Lambeau. They come into the house and present him with some stock in the Green Bay Packers. He kept that, put it away someplace. We still have it today, but I don't think it's worth as much now as, well, maybe it's worth the same, I don't know. But it's framed on the walls from my nephew. She dated Curly Lambeau from about 1938 to about 1942, 43. She never married. She became ill, went home, didn't see anybody. She also was chased all over Europe and half the country after her London tour by an Italian count. My grandmother liked to talk about that because he would send letters to my grandmother begging her to beg Beatrice on his behalf to marry him. She just wouldn't marry him. 8 years old, my dad got free dancing lessons. Not that he wanted them. Because when you're an 8-year-old boy, you don't want to learn how to dance. You want to go outside and play. He did turn out to be a very good dancer. He just didn't like it. Which is something my mother complained about quite often. Beyond that, I don't know that much about her, other than she was, had enjoyed what she did. She had to leave town, but she always loved Two Rivers, and every chance she got, she came back and either stayed with her folks who lived down on 22nd and Forest, or she stayed later on when they passed away with my grandpa and grandma Cutchy. I never had a chance to meet her, obviously. And I don't know what else to tell you. I did put some of the newspaper articles and stuff that my grandma kept. She was the only one in the family that kept a scrapbook of her. And if you care to, just go on over there and read it. She was touted as a tall woman at 5'6", and had the world's most perfect back and perfect feet. So, I don't know if that's a good thing or not. And known as a glamour girl, so she did a lot of modeling as well. And that was Beatrice Coach. Oh, the Kent part. Maybe I will tell you this. She gets over to London, and well, she changed her name from Kucharewski to Coach for stage purposes, which many folks do. My dad changed his name to Coach from Kucharewski because he was in the securities business, and for some reason people could not either pronounce Kucharewski or remember it. And it's really not that hard. Kochorosky. That's the first thing I learned. By the time I got to 4th grade, when they changed our name, I had to rememorize shorter. So he changed it to Coach, hoping that his folks would not be so hurt by the fact he was changing her name. So she had changed it to Coach. When she got to London, however, the English, for some reason, could not wrap themselves around Coach. I don't know why. So her manager over there made her change her name to Kent. So at any given time in the newspaper, they would be writing about Beatrice Kucharewski, Beatrice Coach, or Beatrice Kent, right up to her obituary. Every day, a different name appeared. So she was active. That's all I can remember.
Okay. Well, the caption that Walter put under my sister's picture was, "From backyard skating rink to ice follies." Well, that was pretty concise. But Walter thought that because I was Margaret's sister, I maybe could fill in a little bit of what went down in between it. But I could only do it if I could do it in 10 minutes or less. Well, Walter, put away that stopwatch. The question is, what event in 1936 was the most likely reason why a young girl would fall in love with ice skating? And the answer, and I bet many of you already know this, was that in 1936, Hollywood produced the first of many Sonja Henie movies. Some of you may not know who Sonja Henie was, but she was a champion figure skater living in Norway, and she had won all the awards that there could possibly have been won as a figure skater. And not only was she an incredible ice skater, but she was also absolutely adorable. And Hollywood generally takes notice of combinations like that, and they could see great potential for Sonja Henie as a movie star. So the first Sonja Henie movie, One in a Million, was shown across the country, and Hollywood was right, because almost overnight, Sonja Henie became a sensation. When the Sonja Henie movies began coming to the Rivoli, Margaret was about 8 or 9. And because we lived a block from the Rivoli, and because it was a safer world back then, kids like Margaret could go unaccompanied to the matinees. But admission was 10 cents. Now today that seems so little, but back then in the 1930s, 1 dime was serious money, and families had little to spare. Nevertheless, when Sonja Henie came to town and Margaret wanted to go, our mother always managed to find a dime. And off Margaret would go. And as Sonja skated across the screen and twirled about, there would sit Margaret, mesmerized and bedazzled. And you can just imagine what would be going on inside that little girl's head as she would picture herself up there skating on the ice. And thus it was that Margaret's dream began, that one day she would be able to skate just like Sonja Henie. Now, it's not as if Margaret had never been on skates before. She had, because in Two Rivers, when winter came, everybody skated. But there was a problem. And the problem was Margaret's skates. Sorry?
Clamp on.
Clamp on.
If
Oh.
you might, it's hard to hear back here.
Oh, hard to hear. Oh, I'm so sorry. Why didn't you speak up sooner? Where do you want me to go back to? Okay. Well, anyway. So we got through Sonja Henie, and Margaret went to the movies, and she was all on Twitter. Okay. Anyway, and now we're back in Two Rivers, and Margaret, we're wondering why she was having a problem skating. Well, let me find my place. It was her skates, because her skates were boys' skates, and they were black, and they were straight bladed. And more than anything, Margaret had wished for a pair of white figure skates. But those were the Depression years, and parents had a hard time just making ends meet. So a pair of figure skates was going to be a luxury. But fortunately for Margaret, Sonja Henie had also bedazzled our mother. And Margaret got her skates. I don't know exactly what year that was, But by the time those skates got passed down to me, after first going through my sister Carol, I began to notice that Margaret really was a pretty good skater. But that wasn't all that I noticed. When we'd all go skating at the rinks, Carol and I would dress in our bulky woolen clothes. But Margaret would go to the rink looking rather spiffy. And she'd be wearing her attractive, custom-made woolen skating dress with a matching hood. That first skating dress of Margaret's was made by our mother, and it was made from one of her old winter coats. In later years, when Carol and I would talk about our childhood, we had both noticed that Margaret had gotten an unusual amount of extra attention from our mother. But it didn't take us long to figure it out, and it really was pretty simple. Margaret's dream had become our mother's dream. And it gave our mother a little escape from the hardships of the Depression and from the caring for 6 children, 5 of whom arrived all too regularly. Now for Margaret, winter would never come fast enough. But when the temperature started dropping and overnight a big puddle on St. Luke's playground would turn to ice, there would be Margaret all by herself, twirling away. Sometimes when the river wasn't quite hard enough or the rinks weren't quite ready, our dad would haul out the hose and he'd flood part of the yard. But mostly we skated on the rinks. Now as we got older, the rinks became the place to meet all the boys. And most of us girls would go there just hoping that some of those boys would ask us to hold hands and skate around the rink. And I just have to tell you, one of my biggest thrills was when Maury Halverson asked me to skate. Whatever happened to Maury? He was so darn cute. But Margaret, on the other hand, would go to the rink strictly to practice her routines. And whenever Margaret skated, there was an audience. Quite often they were just a bunch of the younger skaters who would cluster around the sidelines and watching Margaret skate. And in a way, Margaret's skating was bedazzling them. And I remember something special that Margaret always used to do. After doing her big performance for her little audiences, she would always ask the children if they wanted to learn some tricks. And then she would spend quite a bit of time teaching them tricks. Well, I think I'm going to take a sip. Margaret was a junior in high school when Mom got a phone call from Cleveland, Ohio. Well, it was Mom's sister. The Ice Follies were coming to Cleveland, and did she and Margaret want to come for a weekend and go and see the show? Oh my gosh, the Ice Follies. That was the top of the line show for an ice show. And off they went. Now, you might think that just going to see the Ice Follies would be quite enough. But Margaret's agent, my mother, had other ideas. Somehow or other, she arranged for, or maybe the word is finagle, for Margaret to have an audition before one of the show's producers. Well, I do recall Mom later describing the producer as being so very, very kind to them. And, oh yes, he said, Margaret was an exceptionally good skater, but, and here came the but and the advice, if she has her heart set on skating professionally, she really should have some formal figure skating lessons. Well, you know what happened. When my mother got back to the hardware store, she sounded the alarm. And naturally, you know, she told all of her regular customers all about Margaret's audition and all about Margaret needing more ice skating lessons, which I think kind of shocked my mother, actually. She thought she was ready for big time. But anyway, Margaret, it paid off, all of Mom's chatting with the customers, because it was a tip from one of those customers which led Margaret to the St. Paul Skating Club in Minnesota, where she spent an entire summer learning how to skate by the books. So that the advice given to her by that kindly producer must have been the correct information, because the following winter, Holiday on Ice came to Milwaukee. An audition was arranged, and Margaret was hired. And what's more, she would leave with the show that very week, so it was all very exciting. But at that point, Margaret's fantasy was about to become a reality. And my mother never did quite stop being a stage door mother. The town always knew just where Margaret was and what she was doing. Oh, she met Eva Perone, and it never ended. But it was fun to be a sister and to also skate, and I wasn't too bad. But when I came back to town to live, and people would say, "Oh, you're a Sittinger girl. Oh, was you the skater?"
in their lives in show business. And I thank the presenters very much. I thought that was extremely well done. But sometimes there are talents right close to us who are building and someday may be big stars just like we heard about today. I don't know, I heard some commotion out in the back there. Is there any problem back there? What is this? What is it? Come right over here. My goodness, what are you?
A penguin.
And what is your stage name?
Captain Cook.
How did you get that name? Where did you play? What did you appear in?
Mr. Papa's Penguins.
Yes.
And I was Captain Cook in there, and
How many kids were in that show?
102.
102 children. Okay, and how many penguins were there?
12.
12 of them. Some were a little quite smaller.
Yep.
Okay. How many plays have you been in?
3.
3 already. That's wonderful. You want to tell people your real name?
Spencer Slager.
Cleveland town?
Washington House.
Well, I don't tell you, I saw the production that these kids were in, and it was absolutely wonderful. I hope a lot of you. That's what he kept doing during the play. So, did you enjoy the show today?
Yes.
That's good. How old are you?
9.
9 years old.
Where do you go to school?
McGee.
McGee. You have anything you want to tell the people here? Well, maybe they'll talk to you when you go waddling down the line.
Yeah. Thank you for coming.
Boy, that's really off the ground, isn't it?
Well, that's you guys, hi. Phyllis and Bill. Fine. You got a nice compliment for what you've been doing in Washington. Is that the picture that was in the paper? From Washington. No, I'm not. That's right, yeah. Becky's going to be coming home in Washington outside
Camera blows my mind.
Yeah, two of them. Well, we went to one because that was playing, Rick had worked with them. He said they were really good. So.